Hello, welcome to episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Friday, June 30th. Hope everyone's having a good day so far and had a good rest of their day yesterday. We've got a lot to get into here to close out the week. And not only are we closing out the week, but we are closing out the month of June. Tomorrow is July 1st. And we are now just about a week away, really, from the All-Star break. Next Sunday will be the last games before the All-Star break. 10 more games for the Yankees. They've got 3 in St. Louis. Then they've got 4 at home against Baltimore, 3 more at home against Chicago to close things out next week. So the month of June is just about over. The Yankees and Mets will both play one more game this month. If you're a Mets fan, I think you're not happy that the month is over, but you're relieved because you shouldn't be happy if you're a Mets fan, but you should be at least like, okay, it's finally over. The month of June, this was a month to forget for the New York Mets, and really this was one of the worst months the Mets have had, not only just recently, but when you look back at their franchise history, and they've had some really bad months of June, this ranks up there with one of the worst months of June the New York Mets have had in their history, and one of the worst months of June we've definitely seen in baseball. I mean, the Mets have been the worst team in baseball this month. Them and the Padres, both of them are obviously reeling and just getting crushed and just pathetic baseball. Same thing with the Cardinals as well, which the Yankees will obviously visit them today in St. Louis for 3 games starting tonight. But a 7 and 18 month. They'll close things out tonight, so the best they can do is 8 and 18, which is still 10 games under 500. They didn't win a single series. They lost every single series except one, which doesn't even really count because they split against the Yankees. So they didn't win a series, and that's just about as pathetic as things can get. So we'll get to that later on. We'll get to a little bit of basketball, though, to start off today's program, as James Harden wants out again. He's working with the 76ers for another trade, and we've heard rumors that the Knicks and the Clippers are 2 teams that could potentially be involved, in 2 teams to keep an eye out for the potential James Harden sweepstakes. I am here to tell you, if you're a New York Knicks fan, you want nothing to do with James Harden. We'll get into that, open up the show. Where could potentially James Harden land, and why the New York Knicks should stay far away from James Harden, because we've seen this before from him over the past couple seasons. So we'll get to that to open up the program. Obviously, NBA free agency starts today at 6 p.m. Eastern, so some of the top names out there, Kyrie Irving obviously available, Draymond Green is obviously available as well. There's definitely some big names out there. There's definitely some guys to keep an eye out for. Chris Middleton, Fred VanVleet are about your top 5, top 6 names. I think I already mentioned Draymond Green as well. So there's definitely some big names out there. We'll see where all the pieces fall come 6 p.m. Eastern for the start of free agency, along with many other pieces. Obviously, Cam Johnson of the Brooklyn Nets. We'll see what the Nets do. Hopefully, we're hearing rumors that it could be in the range of about a 4-year deal, so hopefully we bring him back. Obviously, a solid piece for this team. Second topic, we'll get to the Mets. We'll get to their pathetic month of June and the pathetic series they just had against the Brewers, and we'll get into the Mets and Starling Marte, who had an awful series. Every series, it's almost like there's a new guy for the New York Mets to point out to say, this guy was the reason we lost. And Starling Marte, I mean, what a brutal series for him. Came up in multiple big spots, and last night was the cherry on top. Those 3 pitches he swung at, it was like somebody put a blindfold on him and just say, hey, 3 pitches are going to come at your way, swing at all of them, and hope you make contact. I mean, that might have been the worst at-bat I've ever seen. And I'm a Yankee fan, and I watch Josh Donaldson every night. So that's how you know it's bad last night from what we watched from Starling Marte in the series finale against the Brewers. So we'll get to that, and we'll get you ready for tonight's game against the Giants, along with the Yankees-Cardinals game, one of obviously the 3-game set in St. Louis. So a lot on tap here to close out the week. But we'll start off the program today talking a little bit of basketball as the NBA offseason really starts to get started here. The NBA, obviously, draft is in the rear view. Nets made 3 picks. Obviously, the Knicks didn't have any picks. It's an interesting offseason, as we mentioned, going in for both the Nets and the Knicks, because you go into this offseason with the Knicks and you feel they're a 1-star away, whether that's a Paul George, whether it's a Damian Lillard, whether it's a Zion Williamson, whether it's a Zach LaVine, whatever the New York Knicks might do, it seems like they're 1 star away from pairing with Jalen Brunson, from legitimately becoming not only a deep playoff contender, but a title contender in an Eastern Conference that is tough. It's difficult, but if you have Jalen Brunson, you add another superstar, you look at this Knicks roster and you like your chances. So, you wonder what the future is of Julius Randle and all that stuff. And then when you look at the Brooklyn Nets side of things, I know many of you don't care about the Brooklyn Nets, but me being a Nets fan, I'm going to talk about them here on the show. It's an interesting offseason for them as well. Do they go after a guy like a DeJounte Murray? Do they go after a guy like a Damian Lillard? Do they kind of stay put, have a reset year, then next season go after another star? Do they just let Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and them continue to develop? What do the Brooklyn Nets do as well as they approach the free agency period starting today, 6 p.m. Eastern, is when all the big moves will start to come down, and then you'll get all these trades and get all these asked out. But it's funny because before we really take a deep dive into the James Harden stuff and why, if you're a New York Knicks fan, you should want nothing to do with him. And I have experience of a Nets fan, and we'll get into the debacle with the Nets and who really was to blame, and we'll look back at the Ben Simmons, James Harden trade, which really, when you look back on it, it was a lose-lose for both sides because the Sixers never won a title, and Ben Simmons has done nothing for the Nets. All he does is post workout videos that show, oh, I'm back, I'm coming back, but yet he can't do it on the court. So until Ben Simmons does it on the court, I don't believe any of this workout video stuff that he's going to have a huge comeback season. He's got to prove it first. But the NBA literally is, it's like a drama TV show. It really is. It's literally every offseason, you get 2 to 3 superstars that want out. You get a guy that, is, and again, this is a little bit of a different scenario with Harden because it's not like Harden is saying, oh, get me out of this place middle of the year like he did with the Nets, where he completely quit on the team. He gave up. We all remember the 2-point game against the Sacramento Kings right before he got traded. We all remember that. When he quit on the Nets, he quit on the team, he gave up, he wanted out. So it's not like he has a temper tantrum. It seems like both sides are mutually agreeing, hey, Nick, the Sixers, not the Knicks. The Sixers want to move on. Or James Harden is saying, "Hey, trade me," and the Sixers are like, "All right, we'll respect that and we'll trade you." It's not like it's a clash between two sides. Like the Sixers want to keep him, James Harden wants out, and it's just going to be tough to move on from. So it's a little different. But I just find it funny how James Harden, everywhere he goes, he wants out. Ever since the days in Houston where he showed up to the one game, completely looked like he was just fat and out of shape, just to get traded to the Nets, just so then he can get traded to the Sixers, just so now he can want out of the Sixers again, opts into his contract, and says, I want out. So this throws the report yesterday from Adrian Wojnarowski. Coming from Woj, reliable source. This isn't no rumor. This is real life. This is the Knicks maybe being interested. So again, we got the report. James Harden picking up his $35.6 million team option. The sides are beginning to work together in exploring trade scenarios. So it expected that as Harden has played his last game for the Philadelphia 76ers. Then he came back a couple minutes later and said the Clippers and Knicks are expected to be among the teams that will engage with the Sixers on a potential James Harden trade. Sources tell ESPN. So we got another report today. I want to say it was from Brian Windhorst, I think it was, that the Clippers, or the Clippers, from a Clippers point of view, and we'll get to the Knicks point of view here in a second, but from a Clippers point of view, they would like to bring in James Harden, but they don't want to give up like a Paul George. They don't want to give up a guy like that. They would like to bring in James Harden and build a big three with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden, and go all in, because the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George tenure has kind of been very weird, where they haven't been on the court as much together. They haven't gone anywhere close to an NBA Finals. It's been ugly. It hasn't been very pretty. Both of them are there. It's an opportunity to continue to build on that. You can bring in Harden, build whatever, if you want to call it a big three, and try and go win a championship. So it seems as if the Clippers, the Sixers might want a guy like a Paul George in return. And we've heard rumors that the Knicks are interested in a Paul George. Paul George could be on the move, but if the Clippers were to bring in Harden, it looks like they don't want to give up Paul George. So are they going to be able to give up enough for James Harden? It'll be interesting. But now you go to the Knicks' point of view. Look, this is typical James Harden. Like, if I'm the New York Knicks, if I'm Leon Rose and the front office, I don't even want anything to do with James Harden. Let me take you through James Harden's past couple of seasons really dating back to the 2020-2021 regular season, where he started the year, he held out, said, I want it out. Then he played. He showed up to the Rockets games looking like he was smuggling cheeseburgers under his warm-up pullover. And it looked like he was out of shape. He comes to the Nets, and then all of a sudden, he looks like the most in-shape guy, like he lost 20 pounds overnight. And, you still get the conspiracy theories that he was wearing a fat suit. And look, I'm not going to go down that road. That's in the rear view and stuff like that. But it was just a weird time. The Nets went out and traded for him. They formed a big three. So he wanted out of Houston. He goes to the Nets. In his first year with the Nets, they lose in the second round of the postseason or the playoffs to obviously the Bucks. Now he goes into his second year with the Nets. Now, again, there was drama all over the place. Part of it was the Kyrie Irving vaccination status where he didn't get the vaccine. New York had the mandates. Whatever it is, and issues occurred. He wanted out. So James Harden asks out middle of the year. And he quit on the Brooklyn Nets. Now, look, whether or not the big three blow-up was on James Harden or not, it doesn't matter. Because he gave up on the Nets. Out of the three guys, in my opinion, that are responsible for the destruction of the big three in Brooklyn, it probably goes Kyrie, Harden, and then KD. KD, look, he had injury issues, but at the end of the day, he was out there. He wanted to play. He wanted to win. When he was out there, he didn't cause any drama. He did what he needed to do. He had no vaccine issues. He didn't quit on the team. Sure, he was hurt a lot. Sure, some of his injuries could have potentially resulted in the end of the collapse, but it wasn't like he was out there throwing temper tantrums like Kyrie Irving and James Harden were. James Harden quit on the Brooklyn Nets. He went into that Sacramento Kings game and gave up. He had 2 points. He gave up on the team. He quit in the middle of the season just so then he could get traded. So now he gets traded to the 76ers. They don't win in their first trip around last season. Go into the postseason this year, and they don't win again. They get knocked out by the Boston Celtics in 7 games, including a disastrous Game 7 loss that ultimately got Doc Rivers fired 112-88 on the road at TD Garden. And now he wants out. So to put it short and sweet, he asked out of Houston, got his wish, went to Brooklyn, 1-0, then wanted out of Brooklyn, middle of the year, quit on the team, goes to the Sixers, 1-0, and now, hey, trade me again. So 3 times for a guy that's 30, he'll be 34 in August, so when the season starts, he's going to be 34 years old. He's got hamstring issues. He's a ball-dominant player. He's not reliable. Look at his games played from 2020 to 2021. 42 games in 2020-2021. 65 games played in 2021-2022, which isn't bad. But then last year, he only played 58 games. I mean, this is a guy that probably is going to give you 50 games, maybe. He might play 55 games. He's not reliable. The Knicks need another guy that's reliable. He's a ball-dominant player. You don't want him taking the ball out of Jalen Brunson's hand, who is entering the prime of his career. James Harden is at the end of his career. He's at the end of the prime. He's not the same player once was. He's not the same scorer he once was. Part of that is because he's turning into more of a sixth guy, creating for other guys, more of a playmaker. He was first in the NBA last year with 10.7 assists. He had 21 points per game, which was 32nd in the NBA. He's not quite the 30-point-per-game guy that he was in Houston. Hamstring's an issue. Again, still will go down as one of the better scorers in NBA history. Not saying he's the best, but he'll probably go down as a top 15 scorer in NBA history. I don't know. I'm not going to look at that list. To be honest with you, you'd have to look at the list. I don't want to go down the road of top 15 scorers and see where James Harden stands. But the bottom line is he's not quite the scorer he once was. Sure, he can make sure he can create for other guys, but he's a ball-dominant player. He needs the ball. Do you really want James Harden with the ball-dominant player, over Jalen Brunson, taking away opportunities from Jalen Brunson? Hamstrings are an issue. So do you really want, and some of the issues last year for the Knicks in the postseason were injuries. I mean, Julius Randle, who knows if he was even fully healthy. Do you really want James Harden to play 50 games for you this year? Give up pieces for him, play 50 games in the regular season. I mean, that's not good enough. He's not reliable. He's 34 years old. He's only getting older. The bottom line is this. He's not the same player he once was. He's not reliable, and let's be honest. How can you trust he's going to stay with you for a whole 2 seasons? There's a good chance he plays out the first year. If you don't win a championship, halfway through the second season, he asks out to a contender, goes there and hopes to win. At this point in James Harden's career, and look, you don't fully blame him. He wants to win a championship. He's at the end of his career. He wants to win. He's looking for one more thing, and that's a chip. And that's why he's kind of changed his style of game, where he's turned more into a playmaker, more of a assist guy, not as much of a me, let me shoot 10 threes a game like he did in Houston. Let me dribble for 20 seconds and in the shot clock get down to 3 seconds and then, chuck up a step back three. Sure, he still does that, but he doesn't do that as much. You look at the 3-point attempts from when he was in Houston to where he is now, it's not even close. So, he's turned more into okay, I got to win a championship. I got to change up my game. I'm not going to win a championship putting up 30 a night and not allowing any of my other teammates to get involved. But it's a guy that's so greedy to win a championship. If they aren't winning, if they don't win a championship in year one, there's a good chance James Harden's out of there at the end of next season. So what's the point in giving up assets to bring in a guy that might be there for 1 year? We know the story. We've seen this before. Look, one time a guy asks out, okay. Second time, all right, there's a problem. The third time he agrees to, hey, trade me? I mean, come on now. This is 3 times in about 3 years that James Harden has asked the team to trade him. Houston, Brooklyn, Philly. Good chance next up's going to be the Knicks. I wouldn't even come close to James Harden, nor do you really need him. You have an excellent guard in Jalen Brunson. More of a forward, more of a Zach LaVine, Paul George type guy I would go after to replace a Julius Randle, which isn't a legitimate number 2 to pair up with Jalen Brunson. He just isn't. We know that about Julius Randle. You want to hang on to him, okay. But you want to bring in a guy like a Zach LaVine, Paul George, that's a bigger need to me than bringing in another guard, another ball-dominant guy in James Harden that's only going to cause chaos. And I don't really care if he was the problem or not in Brooklyn. The bottom line is wherever this guy goes, they haven't won a championship. And wherever he goes, he ends up asking out. Because he's impatient. He wants to win. If the Knicks don't win this year, there's a good chance we're sitting here next year, where there's a good chance we're sitting here next year, June 30th. Yeah, June 30th, right? This time next season, get ready for free agent. And James Harden says, I want out of New York. So was a 1-year James Harden rental to just lose in the second round really worth it? Probably not. You don't know what this guy is going to do. He's so unpredictable. I mean, he is kind of predictable. He requests trades every year, but you just don't know how, you can't trust him. And he's not the same player he once was. Can we please just stop with he put up 36 a game back in 2018. It was 2018. He's not the same player. He's 30. He's going to be 34 years old. You're basically saying, okay, let's give the ball to James Harden. Take away from Jalen Brunson, who's a younger player in his prime, and let's give it to a James Harden he's out of his prime. He's not the same player he once was. I know I've said it about 7 times today. I've said it more than James Harden has requested trades in his career, but he's just not. He's not. And the hamstrings are an issue. The availability is an issue. You want to bring in a star, a superstar that's going to be available. You don't want to bring in a guy that's going to give you 50 games. You just don't. Oh, he's big in the playoffs. If he's really that big in the playoffs, then why hasn't he won a championship? I mean, let's be honest here. Last season, I know when you look at that Boston series, he had the 2 big 40-point games, and they both resulted in wins. But when it mattered most, Game 7 of that series, he flopped. He shot 1 of 5 from 3 and 3 of 11 from the field. He had 9 points and 5 turnovers in that game. So when things mattered the most, when the moment got big, he fell apart. Same thing with Game 6. He had 13 points. Didn't connect on a single three, shot 6 of them, and shot 4 of 16 from the floor. So how do you know this guy's going to even help you in the postseason? When the games mattered most last year, Game 6 and Game 7 of that series, James Harden put up, let's see, 13 in Game 6, 9 in Game 7. He's not clutch. He doesn't have what it takes to win. He's not a star to pair with Jalen Brunson. He's out of his prime. He's washed up. Not the same player once was. Doesn't care about the team. All about himself. Stay far away from James Harden if you're the New York Knicks. All you have to do is look what happened across town in the Brooklyn Nets. And I'm not saying take advice from the Brooklyn Nets because the Nets fell for him. The Nets fell for his garbage. He asked out of Houston. We thought we were getting a rejuvenated James Harden, let alone it was just the start of a 2-year span where he was going to request another trade, and now he wants out again. Learn from what happened. The media is going to kill this guy. I mean, you got to realize that too. I mean, this guy, the first time he gets hurt or the first bad game he has, they're going to crush him. And it's funny too because I think the Knicks, again, they have a good group right now. They've got Josh Hart. They've got Jalen Brunson, like RJ Barrett. Maybe they bring in a Dante DiVincenzo. I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily a bad move for the New York Knicks to bring in a guy like a DiVincenzo and then wait for another star to emerge, wait for a Paul George, whatever it might be. Zach LaVine or whatever the case may be. But, I mean, like, every day there's going to be a different story. That's another thing, too. Every single day there's going to be some sort of story with James Harden with the New York Knicks. We saw this with Brooklyn. Every day there was something with him. Every single day. It was something new. So, stay far away from Harden. He is embarrassing. He is all about himself. He is 34 years old when the season begins. Not the same player, not the same scorer. You're the Knicks. Stay far away from James Harden. We've seen this before. Now, again, you look at the James Harden-Ben Simmons trade right now, and you start to wonder, all right, who won it? Because nobody really did. The Sixers picked them up to win a championship. They didn't do it. And then you look at Ben Simmons, and he hasn't done a single thing. Didn't play at all last season. Came into this year, was awful. And then missed a good chunk of the second half of the season. So, the only thing Ben Simmons is good for is a whole lot of workout videos in the gym in the off season, showing how good he is, showing that he's coming back. Meanwhile, every year, again, like at this point, stop posting workout videos. Go out there on the court and prove it. Nobody can, everybody can make shots in a gym. Any NBA player can make shots in the gym with nobody defending them. Until we see you put it out on the court, you've been a disappointment. So it's been a lose-lose, really, because and the Nets I know got picks and stuff, and they got rid of Harden, which was probably the biggest thing. Like, Harden quit on the team. So getting rid of a guy that quit on the team is always a plus because he quit. Like, he gave up. So, I guess you win in that point, but Harden did nothing in Philly, and Ben Simmons, your return. It was supposed to be the Ben Simmons, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant revamped Big Three. And it would never even, Ben Simmons never did a single thing. So, I don't know. It's, looking back on that trade, that's like one of those, that just, it wasn't so much a lose-lose for both sides. It just was, neither side really was impacted much. I mean, it never worked out for the Sixers, and it hasn't worked out for the Nets. It's kind of just, it is a lose-lose, I guess. I basically described what a lose-lose trade is, but it's kind of one of those trades that's just, at the end of the day, it really means a whole lot of nothing now because, Ben Simmons is still in that, and I don't know what he's going to do next season, but he's now out of Philly in terms of Harden. So, anyway, it's interesting, but I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, Knicks fans. What are your thoughts? You want Harden? Don't want Harden? What are you feeling as a New York Knicks fan as we sit here on June 30th, a couple hours out from the start of free agency? You can also hit me up on Twitter at Bubbs52 with your thoughts on the James Harden situation and the potential of the New York Knicks making a run at Harden after wanting out of Philly announced yesterday from Woj. So we'll move on from basketball here, and we'll get into a little bit of baseball. So the New York Mets lose another game yesterday. They now fall to 36-45 on the season. They are now 9 games under 500, 17 and a half games back in the division. They are now 9 games back in the wild card. Things continue to get worse for the New York Mets. They've got one more game today in the month of June, and then it's finally over. And then you can finally say the June swoon, as many Met fans are calling it, is over. One more game today against San Francisco at Citi Field. 3 games to wrap up a 6-game or a 7-game homestand, rather. You'll have Alex Cobb on the mound for the Giants, and you have Carrasco on the mound for the New York Mets here, who didn't necessarily pitch bad in his last time out, but the Mets obviously had a debacle late in that game against Philly to lose it, and now you get Carrasco back on the bump in game 1 of this 3-game set. So, look, the Mets lose another series. They lose game 1, 2-1. They come back, win game 2, 7-2. Steve Cohen speaks on Wednesday. Whether or not you like what he said or not, at the end of the day, it didn't motivate the team at all. I know some people were like, oh, let's see if it motivates the team. It obviously didn't, because they came out on Wednesday after that interview, lost 5-2. And then last night, where Max Scherzer gave you a solid outing, they lose 3-2. And again, we continue to say, I say this all the time on this podcast, and you all know this. But I mean, every single game, they find a new way to lose. And it's every night. It's like, and again, it's the same thing over and over again in terms of, oh, look, they find new ways to lose, but it's also the daily. The pitching was good last night. The hitting wasn't. The offense at times is good, and then the pitching's not. Some nights both are off. Some nights it's just like, there's games where they put up 6, 7, 8 runs, and they still find a way to lose. That's how bad it is for the New York Mets. That's how pathetic this season has been. And it's crazy to think, when you look at the beginning of June, after they had that sweep of the Phillies and they got within striking distance of the division, they were like 3.5 games back at that point in the division. All they had to do was at least find a way to take 2 of 3 against Toronto, which was a team at the time that was reeling. The Toronto Blue Jays at that time was struggling a little bit. They went into that series only like 3 games up on 500. The Mets did as well. So at that time, they were kind of struggling. It wasn't necessarily a hot Blue Jays team you were getting. And the Mets got swept. And that, to me, is where the season completely collapsed. Because then you obviously swept against Atlanta. And you even went into that Atlanta series, though, with there still being a chance for the division. Now, you obviously got swept by Toronto, and things kind of got out of hand after that. But you had an opportunity to go into that Atlanta series, and at least you could have done is take 2 of 3 and found a way to at least keep the division within striking distance, to do something, not 17 and a half games back like they are now, where it's completely out of control and they have no chance. And ever since that, it's just been a complete dumpster fire. So all in all, they've now went 7-18 in the month of June. Last night, they had an opportunity to split the series against the Brewers, which wouldn't have counted as a series win, but at least they would have swept and not lost the series. But they found a way to lose the series with a 3-2 loss last night. So they didn't win a single series this entire month. The only series they didn't lose was the Yankee 2-game Subway Series a couple weeks ago, about 2 weeks ago now. Whether you want to call that a series split or not, I know some people out there don't consider 2-game series an actual series. So if you win 2 games, people don't consider an actual series sweep. However it is, they split. But outside of that, here's what the Mets have done this month. Swept by the Blue Jays, swept by the Braves, lost 2 of 3 against the Pirates, split against the Yankees, lost 2 of 3 against St. Louis, lost 2 of 3 against Houston, lost 2 of 3 against Philly. After that debacle of a performance where they hit 2 batters, walked 3 guys, and you had the big Brett Beatty era last Sunday. And most recently, they come back home and they lose 3 of 4 against the Brewers. And last night was another one of those nights where Max Scherzer pitched fine. Like, he pitched okay. He did his job. He pitched through 6 innings, 7 hits, 2 runs, 2 earned, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts, 1 long ball, but limited the damage, got an ERA down to 3.87. Scherzer was fine last night. TJ McFarland comes in and allows a run. Look, who are these guys that the Mets are rolling out there out of the bullpen? These guys are just, their bullpen is mind-numbing, and I'm not even a Mets fan. But I'm getting the notes ready for the podcast today. Looking at the box score, I watched the game a little bit as well because obviously the Yankees had a day game, so we were able to see the late-night Mets game last night at 7 Eastern because the Yankees played at 3 to close out the Oakland series. But it's mind-numbing looking at these names that the Mets have to go to in the bullpen. Like, who are these guys? TJ McFarland? What are we doing here? Now, he allowed 1 run in a third of an inning. He took the loss. They blew the lead. It was a 2-2 game. The Mets put up 2 runs in the bottom of the third, but that's not that. At the end of the day, that doesn't matter. The Mets bats were dead last night, and they had opportunities, but with runners in scoring position, they couldn't convert. And again, it was Starling Marte, who, along with Francisco Lindor, along with Jeff McNeil, along with Pete Alonso, has been very disappointing this year. Pete Alonso maybe you want to throw his name out of there and say he hasn't been disappointing, but Pete Alonso recently has been struggling. Like, he is, again, Pete Alonso's your streaky hitter. He's your typical power hitter. He's going to go on stretches where he's going to hit a ton of home runs, and he's going to go on stretches and he's going to struggle. That's why his batting average is where it's at 221. But last night, and as I mentioned to open the show, I watch Josh Donaldson on a nightly basis as a Yankee fan, and that's bad. I mean, that's really bad. I mean, it's similar to Daniel Vogelbach because Daniel Vogelbach will sit there and watch pitches go right down the middle, and Josh Donaldson does the same thing. But, I mean, last night, that Starling Marte at bat with runners on base, an opportunity to convert, an opportunity late in the game to take the lead, to take over, to win the game, whether or not that is going to turn their series around or not, turn their season rather around or not, whatever it is, to at least split the series, get a win. He strikes out on 3 pitches, and it was like it's like Buck Showalter went up there and put a blindfold on him and said, hey, swing at 3 pitches. I'm not going to tell you where they are. Just swing at these next 3 and hope you can hit them. I mean, the pitches weren't even remotely close. He goes up there, swings and misses. Good morning, good afternoon, good night to Starling Marte. Mets lose 3-2. I mean, the amount of runners they left on base, they left a total of 9 on base. They were 0 for 4 with runners in scoring position. Marte was 0 for 2. This series, as a whole, Starling Marte left 7 runners on base. I feel like every series, it's a new guy that is blowing it for the Mets. One series, it's the bullpen. The next series, it's Jeff McNeil, who doesn't play well, who's had a horrible season. Batting average has dipped all the way to 255 after winning the batting title last year in the National League, hitting well over 300. His batting average has dipped all the way into the 255 range. I mean, he's had a horrible season. Horrible season. And it's bad. It's really bad. So, McNeil has not been good. Lindor, obviously, look, his whole body of work hasn't been good. Nimmo's probably been the one guy, and I know at times some of his, defensive plays, there's been some balls that have dropped in the outfield that are definitely questionable. But all in all, he is hitting 283. He's got an 835 OPS. He's been the most consistent player for the New York Mets this season. He has been. And sure, you want to say he's not quite the guy he was last year. I mean, when you look at the numbers, he's actually having a better year this year than he was last year. So, I think actually he's been one of the most constants for the Mets. Other than that, Marte hasn't been good. Lindor was 0 for 4 yesterday with 2 Ks. He hasn't been good. I mean, Lindor's on base percentage is 303. That might dip below 300. Starling Marte this month's got an on-base percentage under 300. That's ugly. And there was a stretch there where it seemed like he was starting to get going a little bit. Like, he had that 5-game stretch where he was hitting he hit 300 over that 5-game stretch. I remember talking about it earlier this month when talking about Lindor and Marte and the big issues, but he's been horrible. I mean, especially how good he was last year. And again, we talk about with Marte, his value last year, sometimes you don't fully understand the guy's value until you don't have him. We know that with Judge. Like, he's dominant, but when you don't have him, you even understand how much how much more valuable he is when you don't have him, because the Yankees lineup's not the same without Judge, and we see that. And last year was the same thing with Marte. Like, when Marte went down, the season collapsed. In September and into October, he came back, wasn't the same player for the postseason, which, look, he came back, tried to fight through injury, just didn't play well enough, which you really can't blame the guy because he was fighting through an injury. But once he went down, the Mets season collapsed. And it's like, man, this guy was so crucial for the Mets last year. Batting, I believe it was .294. Had such a good season, offensively and defensively. And it was just like, provided so much energy for the team. Could do a little bit of everything. Could provide a little bit of pop, extra base hits, get on base, threat on the bases, speed. I mean, all that stuff. We talk about speed doesn't slump last year with Starling Marte. That was the big saying. Speed never slumps. Like, there's always a way to help the team when you have speed. Marte's got a lot of it. But this season, he's been pathetic. And this series was probably by far maybe his worst series of the season. And that's saying something considering how bad he's been. It only getting worse. Like, again, I mean, these losses weren't as bad as the Sunday loss against the Phillies, but you continue to just say to yourself, if you're a Mets fan, like, is this rock bottom? Is this rock bottom? And as each series go by, rock bottom just doesn't, okay, this clearly isn't rock bottom, or this is rock bottom. 3 days later, this is rock bottom. They just keep losing series, and it just keeps getting worse. So, look, the Mets are out of it. They have no chance. The season's done. You want to give it one more month with the veterans, go ahead and do it. They're going to go into the All-Star break. I mean, the only way they go into the All-Star break with a fighting chance is they've got 6 games. The least they've got to do here over these next 6 games is, I apologize. They've got 12 games left. No, 9 games left. They've got 3 against San Francisco, and then they head out west for 6 against Arizona and then San Diego to close out the All-Star break. Then they'll come back after the All-Star break and welcome the Dodgers into town for 3 games. You've got to have like a 10-2 stretch these next 12 games, which would get you to 46 and 47. If you go 10-2 over these next 12 games, gets you to 46 and 47. That is the only chance you have of renewing your season over these next 12 games. If you go into the All-Star break with a record of, 40, whatever it is. You go into the All-Star break down 9 games under 500, 10 games under 500. You're not going to have enough time come trade deadline to try and improve the team. You're just not. You're just going to run out of time. And these next 12 games aren't easy. You've got 3 against a San Francisco team that's playing very well, currently hold a wild card spot. They're 6-4 in the last 10. I know they've lost 2 straight, but still their whole body of work recently this month has been solid. They've been one of the hotter teams this month. Then you got an Arizona team who's been phenomenal this season, first in the National League West at 5-5, and they're having a very good season, 14 games up on 500, all that stuff. And you have to go out west. And then you get a reeling Padres team. But at that point, over these next 6 games, there's a good chance the Mets go 2-4. There's a good chance the Mets go 1-5. I could definitely see them getting swept by Arizona. They might find a way to take 1 against San Francisco, but Arizona's not going to be easy. You might get swept there. And in San Diego, even if you take 2 of 3, the Mets, they've dug themselves into such a deep hole, there's just no getting out of it. And it gets worse every series. And, you could say, June's done. The month was a bad month. Start July fresh. Start July strong. You've dug yourself into such a deep hole, there is no coming back from July or June. It's just, there isn't. It's tough to come back from a 7-18 month, especially early in the season like this, where you're so down and then you've got about a month to find a way and figure it out. And the All-Star break kind of takes away a week of that, so you really only have about 2-3 weeks to figure this thing out, which isn't much at all. So, you wonder what, Steve Cohen said, how you won't do much at the trade deadline if nothing changes. He said everything's on the table. I don't even know. I don't even know what. I really just, this team is so bad that there's no helping it. Again, I think you give it one more week. Or not one more week. You give it a month. Give it a month. If you're 8 games under 500 by the deadline, maybe you trade away some of the pieces. I don't know what the Mets will do. I don't know what Cohen will do. We'll obviously cross that bridge once you get there on August 1st. But if in a month this thing doesn't get better and you're still 9 games under 500, even if it gets worse and you get to the point where you're like 12 games under 500 and you're like 12 games out of a wild card spot and you have absolutely no shot of doing anything like they kind of do now, call up the young kids. Call up Vientos again. Alvarez had the drop pop-up last night. We continue to talk about the defense. Like, it's a Little League team. It's bad news Bears. And Alvarez hasn't played well. I mean, he hasn't. He has had a very rough month. After a very good month of May, he's had a very rough month. Hasn't hit well. Beatty's been So, I know the usage of Beatty maybe is questionable sometimes with him against the lefties and stuff, but Beatty hasn't been very good recently, especially, some of the errors as well in the field like he had against Philly in that final game of that 3-game set and then that 8th inning debacle. But if this thing doesn't get better, I say you just roll with Alvarez, Beatty, call up Vientos, call up Mauricio, call up the kids. See what they got. Run them for 2 months and just see what they can do. Try and develop them. Try and get them some major league action. At the end of the day, that's really all you can do with the Mets, with the bad position that they found themselves in with this roster. All right, so that'll do it for the Mets and the James Harden stuff. So we'll get into tonight's game. As I mentioned, Mets-Giants tonight. As I mentioned, Alex Cobb versus Carlos Carrasco on the bump in Game 1 of that 3-game set. And as for the Yankees-Cardinals, you got Luis Severino on the mound tonight versus Matthew Liberatore going for the Cardinals. The Yankees will have Sevy tonight, Cole tomorrow, and probably Randy Vasquez Sunday because Brito just pitched, so they'll probably have Vasquez pitch to fill that 5th start. So Brito and Vasquez have obviously been very good as those filling in the 5th guy in the rotation as those spot starts here, especially throughout this month. So with Cortez on the IL and Rodon continuing to be on the IL, but Rodon is on his way back. So those guys have definitely been very good. You'll probably get Vasquez Sunday. Nothing announced yet, though. But that's just my assumption. You probably won't go Brito because he just pitched Tuesday. I mean, that's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's 4 days. That's 4 days rest. So they probably go with Randy Vasquez on Sunday, but we'll see what the Yankees do. You get Rodon back. Again, we went into this. They get Rodon back in the Baltimore series, but you went into this road trip, you said 4-2 at the very least. They took 3 against Oakland, take 2 or 3 against St. Louis, and come on home and get ready for a big series against the Orioles, and in 3 games after that against the Cubs, and hopefully go into the All-Star break on a high note, and hopefully shortly thereafter get Judge back. We'll see. I don't know. I mean, he threw a ball yesterday in Oakland before the game, or it wasn't yesterday. It was the day before, Wednesday. It was the Domingo Germán perfect game, I believe it was. Before the game, he was out in the outfield throwing. So I guess any baseball activity at this point is good. They still don't have any timeline, and the Yankees still aren't releasing anything, so I don't really know what to expect at this point with Judge. So anyway, that'll do it for the podcast here today. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back here on Monday, recapping all the stuff that happens, recapping everything that happened so far. If anything crazy happens in the NBA, obviously the James Harden stuff, we'll get to a lot of other stuff as well coming out of this weekend. Maybe somebody else pitches another perfect game. We'll see how everything plays out. So enjoy your weekend. I will see you all back here on Monday. As always, hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.